Will there be pets in heaven? Are we in the end times, Pastor?
I
What are
think
current
it's
believers supposed to do with
important to
spiritual
God
reality,
since
and how would you grow in this
Jesus
area?
proclaimed it.
Hello, and welcome back to Now That'll Preach. My name is Jared Crowley. I'm your host. Sitting across from my pastor and friend, David Freck, lead pastor of Church of the Harvest.
Yes, sir.
And if you've never seen That'll Preach before, basically we take your comments and your questions, or even just topics that you throw at us, and we give them to this guy with no preparation whatsoever, and ask him to come up with a little sermonette, little discussion based around it. And so it's always a good time. Always end up walking out like with some little nuggets for myself. So
Good. Awesome.
all right. So this week's question, I wanted to get. We've done this before, similarly with marriage advice, but I wanted to get your perspective on like the best piece or a couple of your best pieces of parenting advice.
Okay.
And I was curious too, because we obviously just talked before the camera started about how much things have changed for parents now
Oh, yeah.
versus when you were parenting. So
Right.
I'm curious if you have maybe a different answer for modern parents just based on, obviously your two daughters are parents now, or if it's always the same advice, you know?
Biblically, yeah, the kids are kids.
Yeah,
I mean, some of the scenarios, environmental scenarios may be somewhat differently.
Right,
But
right.
kids really, they're kids.
yeah,
So I do have some advice. Some of this is biblically based. Some of it is just
yeah, just
what I
practical.
would call practical wisdom.
Yeah, for sure.
Some might not even consider it that.
Yeah,
Now, once again, I'm a grandparent now, so I do definitely relate to my grandchildren differently than I related to my children.
sure, yeah.
But I have earned that right. So I would say that compassionate discipline is absolutely key. That correction and not punishment should be the way you relate to your children. So consequences need to be consistent, and I would say unemotional.
Okay,
Now, I guess I could maybe frame that a little
sure,
bit.
yeah,
So I'm clearly talking about developing disciplines in your children.
yeah,
I think one of the great problems in our current culture is that kids are having everything done for them all the time by everybody.
yeah.
They learn no sense of personal responsibility. When they grow into adults, they feel entitled.
Yeah.
They do not function well societally because they can't understand a world that doesn't include everybody doing something for them.
Yeah.
This is not healthy.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
not healthy for society,
Yeah.
and it is miserable for you as a parent.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I love them. Great. If you love them, teach them to be self-reliant. Teach them to be disciplined. Teach them and I'm not, leak it out. Based
sure.
on their age, based on where
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
at in life.
Right.
Leak it out. They don't have to become, professionally
Yeah.
ordered people, but they need to just have responsibilities.
Yeah,
They need
yeah.
to be accountable to those responsibilities. So I think that that's super, super important.
For sure, yeah.
The other thing that I think is super important for parents is I use the language, be corrective, don't punish. So the tendency is you've done something wrong, I'm going to punish you. So whatever you decide is punishment.
Yeah,
I'm going to take their phone away, or I'm going to stand them in a corner, or there's so many ideas about it nowadays.
yeah, sure.
But I still believe the biblical way is the best way. But I would say, if your goal is to punish them, you're missing the point.
Yeah, for sure.
The goal has to be to correct.
Yeah,
So training a child in the way they should go, training the child in the way they should go.
Yeah.
That's what the Bible tells
Yeah.
us. So that when they grow old, they don't depart from it. So when people will say, my kids aren't following the Lord, well, the question then has to be, I know they have their own free will. At some point, they have their own free will.
Sure, yeah.
But what is so critical is, did you train them or not?
Yeah, right.
And training is, did they always feel punished? Did they always feel, was the goal of what you were doing to make sure they understood consequences, but they didn't understand why the consequences?
Sure,
So
right.
training connects consequences with understanding. So when you're training your children, understand that consequences are a great teaching mechanism.
Sure.
But they can't just have consequences without understanding.
Yeah, for sure.
That's training.
Yep. Yep.
Consequences with understanding.
Yeah.
And reward.
Yeah, sure.
So it's not just consequences when they do something wrong, it's also the consequences of doing it right are reward.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So understand that these things work together.
Right.
And I also talked about doing correction without emotion.
Yeah.
In other words, consequence without
Right.
emotion. Too many times we let our kids badger us to the point where we just blow up.
Yeah, sure.
And then we react. We're
Right.
emotional in the way we're relating to it. If you have clear markers, like, you know, I've always watched parents, I'm going to count to 3, right? And then they count to 3, and then they count to 3 again, and then they count to 3 again.
Right.
They clearly, their kids don't believe a word they say.
Yeah, yeah.
So I started that with my kids, and I'd say, okay, I'm gonna count to 3.
Yeah.
And if this doesn't change, this doesn't change. And I'm not mad. I'm just I'm counting to 3.
Right.
And when I got to 3, there wasn't a 4, and there wasn't a restart. When I got to 3, the consequence came.
Yeah.
So I didn't let it bubble into this explosive environment
Yeah.
or just get driven to the point where I just was out of my mind.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
Right.
you didn't do it within 3, so here's the consequence.
Yeah.
Then I'd say I'm counting to 2.
Mm-hmm.
What about 3? Well, it's not 3 anymore. It's 2 now. And then I'm counting to 1.
Right. Right.
To where I built in, if I asked them to do something,
Yeah.
it wasn't a long
Sure.
negotiation.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Now, you know, once again, you got to manage that with wisdom. But,
Right.
But I think the problem is kids don't believe what we say
Yeah.
because we are not consistent.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So we have to be consistent.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you're consistent, if you have clear parameters
Yep.
and you're consistent with it, you can take the emotion out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
My girls would walk in if they were late.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I had a curfew. If they were late,
Mm-hmm.
there was no discussion.
Yeah. Sure.
They knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they'd hand me their phone and they'd say, I know I'm grounded for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good night, love you.
Yeah. Right.
And
right.
it wasn't a debate.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Whereas, oh, Dad, you know, I
Right.
won't ever do it again. I'm sorry, that's
Yeah.
not how this works.
Right, right. Which is so healthy for a kid long term. Like when you're talking about training a kid, that, hey, these are the boundaries that we're setting, and if you cross those boundaries or you don't meet expectations, like you said, there's going to be a consequence, and it's
Absolutely.
not going to change based on what the scenario was.
Are there
or-
moments where there are exceptions?
Yeah,
There are.
Sure, right.
But
yeah,
as it relates to consistency,
yeah,
it cannot be a negotiation every time something
yeah,
happens.
yeah, for sure.
And I believe that most parents are in absolute just punch drunk land
Yeah.
because they are not ordered,
Mm-hmm.
they don't set clear parameters,
Sure.
and then they don't maintain those parameters.
Yeah, right,
Bottom line.
right.
So it's not your kid's fault.
Yeah,
And so I believe if you'll do those things,
Yeah.
that goes a long way. Yeah, people say, well, you didn't say anything about love. Well, I'm going to guess that most parents love their children.
yeah, right.
I'm not, so I don't, why do I need to talk about what
Right,
that looks
right.
like? I mean, how do you,
Yeah.
So I realize there are values that are a part of your home, so you
Yeah.
need to have clear values assessments.
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's something, can I share this with you? That's something you and your spouse set.
Sure. Yeah.
Your kids' values are going to change based on the week.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
that's up to you.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you raise your children based on those values.
Right.
So these are a couple, little thoughts
For sure.
that maybe will help parents.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, if you don't have that personal discipline, if you don't have that deep commitment, if you don't value your own values,
Sure.
then chaos will reign.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Yeah.
You can
right.
pray about it, read the Bible about it until
Sure.
Jesus comes, but if you're not doing these things, it isn't going to make any difference.
Yeah,
So-
for sure, man. Well, obviously I'm not a parent or anywhere near that stage right now, but I will lock that one in for sure. Probably come back to this.
Yeah,
in 10
no,
years.
it's a
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a thing, and I think that there's been a lot of, I see two sides of the equation. There's the one side where, kids are having kids, and that's a whole nother layer.
Yeah, sure.
And then I see the other side of that where people are waiting longer.
Yeah.
They're getting themselves kind of through the early stages of their marriages, and they're getting real solid there before they have children, real thoughtful, real process.
Yeah.
And I think, both of those have their challenges.
Yeah.
But if, obviously I think you ought to do it God's way, get married, take a little bit of time, make sure you're solid as a couple, because the strength of your parenting is going to be related to the strength of your marriage.
Definitely. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And then of course, broken homes also create another layer.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And I always tell people, when it's your house, it's your rules. You gotta, not that we're dealing with it based on rules. It's really your values. So,
Sure. Right.
Hey, I understand you're going to be at your mom's or you're going to be at your dad's, but when you're here, this is what it is.
Yeah. Sure.
And they might resent it because the other one might be completely permissive.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you, in the long term, your responsibility is to the Lord and to that child to make them self-reliant and solid. So
yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Well, super appreciate your advice. Obviously, I think the fruit of your perspective on this situation speaks for itself. So really
my kids serve the Lord.
Yeah.
They're serving the Lord with us.
Yeah,
I mean,
for
they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
They're in their mid to late 30s at this point. And I'm not saying we did it all right.
Sure.
We never do.
Right.
But we were consistent.
Yeah.
We were committed. Our values were clear.
Yeah.
I mean, these are things and our kids still love us.
Yeah.
They were teenagers and they had their moments.
Right.
But, we managed to navigate it.
For sure, man.
And you still need the Holy Spirit. I really believe if you're going to pray for anything as a parent, that my last little piece of advice would be pray for discernment.
Yeah. Yeah, I could totally see that. Yeah.
Pray for discernment.
Yeah.
Pray that God gives you discernment so you understand what's going on behind the layers of what your kid is presenting.
Yep.
This is especially important when they start getting into their adolescent years.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, man.
You need the Holy Spirit's help.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. All right. Well, appreciate your perspective, man. We appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Feel free to share it around with anybody that you know that is a parent or is about to be a parent, and the same goes for all of these episodes. We backlog all of them. And so it's really meant to grow you in your relationship with Christ. And so appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.